there you see some of the protests and the response from police officers in the city of Cleveland after the verdict was read on Friday. Officer Michael Braylow acquitted on all charges he faced, and also CNN reporting that Michael Braylow, the officer in Cleveland where this was found not guilty, again on the counts felony manslaughter were the actually charges that he faced in that trial. That's a great place to start today's roundtable. Around with Miranda and I, we're going to bring in right now the attorney and president of Citizens for Self-Governance, Mark Meckler, and also president of the Law Enforcement Legal Defense Fund and former assistant director to the FBI, Ron Hosko. Ron, it's great to have you with us. Also, Mark, good to talk to you as well. Ron, let's start with you. Your organization has actually been working with Michael Braylow and his defense in this case. Tell us how you feel about the protests that erupted after the verdict. Do you think those protests have any merit?
Well, I'm not at all surprised by the protests. I think that the city of Cleveland had planned and anticipated protests, loud ones. I am a supporter of the First Amendment and the right of our citizens to peaceably gather. They should protest. They should raise these issues, but it does not defeat or undermine the verdict that the judge found properly in this case.
Also, Mark, when you look at the difference here to what took place in Cleveland, of course, you know, you can only make so many comparisons to Baltimore, Ferguson, Missouri, and whatnot. But when you see also on social media, the police department in Cleveland sending out tweets, we will not tolerate any kind of an illegal or unlawful protest. They seem to have a better handle on the situation. Was leadership in the case the big difference between Baltimore and Cleveland in this case?
Well, I think leadership is the case, but I also think the public at large is getting tired of violent, destructive protests. I agree with Ron. I'm an absolute supporter of folks' First Amendment right to get out and protest things that they don't like. But I also believe that we need to believe in our justice system in this country. We need to be able to accept the verdicts when they come down in our justice system. And again, while people can protest those verdicts, I'm glad they're doing so peacefully, and I appreciate the leadership in Cleveland.
Do you think we're going to see this will be the end of it? Do you think we'll see any more?
You know, it's hard to say. I don't have folks on the streets there in Cleveland, so it's hard for me to take the temperature. What I see, again, was pretty well organized. It didn't look like it was getting violent. I think the police are taking a strong hand. I think that keeps things tamped down in a way that hopefully prevents any kind of violence or property destruction.
Ron, what do you think?
Well, I think we're going to see some more in Cleveland, although I hope not violent. And I think we'll see it in other places in the country where you have differences of opinion about the reasonableness of a police officer's actions, and where you have a difference in race between the officer and the person they are trying to subdue. And that is the divider here. That's the driver between some of these violent protests and government.
And do you think we'll eventually at some point see these kind of dwindle down where we won't see these happening?
The protests?
Yeah. Just overall around the country, we've been talking a lot about race relations really in the last year, because it seems like all the time we're prepared for another protest to erupt as soon as somebody doesn't like the verdict. Some of that may be justified, some of it may not be, but it obviously is, clues us in that there's a bigger issue there, and that race relations is a huge problem in this country. Wouldn't you agree, Mark?
I actually wouldn't agree. I don't think race relations in this country are a big problem. I think race leadership is a big problem in this country. I think by the account of most Americans prior to President Obama's presidency, race relations were much better in this country. So I think what we have is a lack of leadership, or incorrect, improper leadership from the top. And I think when you see a change in that leadership, we're going to see race relations go back to what they were before in this country, which is better than a lot of what we see in the news today.
And I don't think it's personally over, and Ron, you can correct me if I'm wrong here, but we're going to still see the trial play out in the city of Baltimore. And by a lot of accounts, there is not a solid case against these police officers. If there is an acquittal, do you think that the city of Baltimore right now, or at least the police department, has taken any lessons from what we saw in Cleveland over the weekend, sending a strong and clear message that that type of illegal behavior will not be tolerated? Or do you think there is still a lack of leadership, starting with the state attorney's office in Baltimore, Ron?
Well, I'm going to agree with Mark, and I do think that there is a lack of leadership, or certainly questionable leadership, based on the comments of the mayor and the district attorney up in Baltimore. I have serious question about the nature of those charges. We just saw them change when the indictments were returned. I think there are serious underlining essential questions about the facts of that case. And if we're setting the citizens up to believe that there's going to be convictions and they're disappointed, again, based on the facts, they're not going to care about the facts, they're going to care about the result.
It certainly seems like
Yeah.
a case of where she may have overpromised and is in a difficult position where now she has to deliver on these promises for convictions on these police officers. And if you listen to the opinions of a lot of legal experts, and Ron, I know
They're shocked,
you're in
really.
this camp where there just does not seem to be enough evidence specifically for the murder charge to stand up in a court of law. We only have about 20 seconds left to go, and we can revisit that subject in a few moments, but we'll ask you guys to both stick around. We also want to talk about some developments on the Patriot Act. We can talk more about our constitutional rights and where things stand. And Congress going home without a real solution to what to do with the Patriot Act. We'll have Mark Meckler and Ron Hosko back to talk about this very important issue when we come right back from this commercial break.
And thanks for staying with us. Now time for part 2 of our roundtable. And joining us once again is attorney and president of Citizens for Self-Governance, Mark Meckler, also president of the Law Enforcement Legal Defense Fund and former assistant director for the FBI, Ron Hosko. Thank you both for staying with us on this Memorial Day. All right, let's talk about NSA. A measure to extend the NSA's bulk collection of Americans' phone records was blocked in the Senate early Saturday. Now, according to the Los Angeles Times, an official claims the NSA has already begun the process of shutting down surveillance programs. So, Mark, I want to ask you, does this leave in doubt whether the Patriot Act will be kept alive?
I think it does leave it in doubt. I'm guessing that some form of it will survive. I think what it points to more significantly is a reasoned, rational debate among the American public about bulk collection of their records. And remember, the records of innocent people not accused nor suspected of any crime are being collected here. So the question is, what is the appropriate balance in times of difficult security measures? I think we're having that debate now. I think it's a healthy debate to have, and I think it should continue in this country.
Ron, what do you think?
Mark is right. I think that the timing is not great, and I am not in favor of changes that take necessary tools away from my former organization, the FBI. The FBI is the lead organization involved in investigating U.S. citizens at home. And if that data, that bulk data, cannot be dipped into by the FBI when it needs it, I am in fear of taking tools off the table that the FBI uses lawfully to get essential information. I want the FBI to be able to connect the dots. They have to have the dots first, and that bulk collection has provided the dots.
And Ron,
if that changes, that may put the FBI in the dark.
Ron, there was some discussion about passing a short-term extension of the Patriot Act. The way things stand right now, we know Congress didn't do that, but are we less safe today, as we heard, if it's true that some of these programs have already they've already started dismantling some of these programs?
I think we're less safe in this way. Having spent certainly the last 15 years in the organization, in the post 9/11 era, where we heard the threat level be elevated repeatedly, particularly around holiday periods, and now you have this much more savvy, diverse threat that's posed by ISIS in their social media way of engaging U.S. citizens. That's my concern, is the opportunity for those lone wolves, single actors, or small groups domestically to attack us, where the FBI might be blind to the data that they need.
And Mark, do you think if Congress was really concerned about those concerns that Ron just raised there, that they would have left without doing anything here?
You know, I think this is one of the problems we can point to over and over, is Congress fails to act when it should and acts when it shouldn't.
Right.
And I have a lot of faith in what Ron says here. I come from a law enforcement family, so I understand the need to collect data. I would argue, though, the federal government has done a poor job, the FBI included, in making the case why exactly they need this data and what this data has led to in the past, so that the American citizen can understand the balance between security and liberty. We have to remember, Ben Franklin said, those who will give up security or liberty for security deserve neither, and in the end will have neither. It's up to the government to make those justifications in a way that the American public will buy.
So, Ron, what do you say to that? Has the FBI done a poor job?
I think that the FBI's arguments have been overshadowed by the arguments on the other side. And I think that's the FBI, that's DOJ. I wish the Bureau would be louder on these issues, would be able to convey the message in a way that really resonates with the public. But here locally in the D.C. area, some group has just started to play a commercial on TV on the cable networks that make it appear as though the government is listening in on your conversations based on this bulk metadata collection. And that's simply untrue. But it doesn't mean that the listener doesn't believe it.
And I don't know if it's necessarily the fault of the FBI, more so as it is the fault of Congress, especially the members of Congress who have security clearances to really learn about these programs in a way that the average American cannot. Don't forget that these are the folks that are elected to represent us in Washington and learn about these programs and then convey that message not just to their own constituents,
Right.
but back to the American people as to why we really need these programs. And instead we saw more of a political debate play out on the floor of the Senate that relates more to 2016 than it does to our national security. At least that's where I'm coming from.
Well, and do you think Snowden had something to do with this? I mean, I think a lot of people focused in on that and said, no, we don't want it.
I think he brought the issue to a lot of Americans' attention, but of course, Edward Snowden is in Russia right now, not here in the United States, facing
Right.
the music as a real whistleblower should. But I've talked too much. Give you guys each about 15 seconds to wrap up, starting with you, Mark.
You know, I agree with what you said. The problem, though, is a general lack of credibility of the federal government at this point. We've seen repeated instances of the federal government using private data against citizens, using thuggish tactics. I'll use that term, the IRS, against private citizens. Right. And so people are rightly concerned that the federal government cannot be trusted. I don't think they apply to any agency in particular. I think they apply to the federal government at large.
Oh, Ron, we got 5 seconds left. Last word to you, sir.
Need more leadership from Capitol Hill, need more leadership in federal government.
A reoccurring theme here, more leadership.
Mark
Guys,
Meckler, Ron Hosko, thank you both for joining us. Happy Memorial Day.